that was probably the most amazing time. No, that wasn't the most amazing. That was another one of those amazings. It's just, I think what God has taught us through this church is that He really does know how to take care of His people. He really can provide. His will is perfect, and He has a perfect plan. And I think Cornerstone in every way is just proof of that. We're just a miracle that He just decided to create. Our pastor was coming back from Columbia. Jim Hammock was his name, Calvary Baptist Church. He was coming back from Columbia from visiting a church member in the hospital and was killed on I-70 in a car wreck. And my husband, Doc Payne, was in the pastor search committee that was looking for a new pastor, and they found a young man named Dusty Klein, who was pastor at Tipton Baptist Church, brought him to Sedalia in view of a call. And while he was here, he drove around Sedalia, and he was surprised that every church in Sedalia was within a 2.5-mile radius of downtown. And so he said, I really feel like if I come to Sedalia, I feel like God is telling me that we need to sell the church where it's located now, buy new property west of town, and just be a part of where the town is growing and be a part of the growing. Calvary was always an older church, older people. Anyway, we had the business meeting, voted to call him as a 100% call. Everybody was excited about the move. We had a committee formed, found the land, had the money in the bank to buy it, and called the business meeting to vote on that particular issue. And people who hadn't been to business meeting in years showed up for that meeting and voted it down. Well, it was, I think, 48 to 52 or something like that, but we considered that a no. And my husband said to Pastor Dusty at that time, he said, I'm old, and I want to see God do something before I die. And he said, it's not going to happen here. And he said, so when you leave, I'm leaving. I'll stay as long as you're here, but when you leave, I'm leaving. What he didn't realize, that there were several other church members that had the same feeling that he did. Not a lot, but a few. And then it was just amazing how God began to bring people out of the woodwork, you might say. Dusty our pastor would be out visiting in town or just at a store, and somebody come up to him and say, by the way, I'm so-and-so, and you know, I've heard a lot about what's going on at Calvary, and you know, I want you to know if you ever do something different, I'm interested. We had people that were from Tipton, Warrensburg, Grover Park Baptist Church, Warrensburg. We had people from, you know, other than just Calvary members. When we finally got to the place that we really felt like God was saying, this is something I want you to consider, we began to just visit other churches in the area. Warrensburg, First Baptist Warrensburg at that time was a very growing, dynamic, contemporary. That was the key word. We felt like it needed to be different. In fact, the Missouri Baptist Convention told us, you need to be different. Don't be just like everybody else in town. And so we visited Grain Valley. It was another church just out in the middle of nowhere, really dynamic, growing church. And then we all just met at our house out in the country, and we just decided this is what we feel like God is calling us to do. So this is another miracle. This story is stoked with miracles. My husband was appointed to the executive board of Doc Payne, was appointed to the executive board of the Missouri Baptist Convention about 6 months prior to all of this happening. And what was amazing was he was put on the church plant team. He met Jerry Field, who became a very dear friend to Cornerstone and to us, and he was placed in a spot that just drew that arrow, that direction of God just pushing us where he wanted us to be. And so with that in our back pocket, we went to Jeff City and talked to Jerry Field. So what do we do? How do we do this? And the Missouri Baptist Convention began to just lay out the ideas of what we needed to do, how we needed to do them. And so we planned for our first meeting to be April 21st, 2001. What we didn't know was where. We tried hotels, restaurants, any avenue that we could find in town, and just couldn't find a place that looked like a match. And so, another miracle, I got to back up 2 years. We had lived on a farm just south, right on South Park, just right on the edge of city limits for 35 years. And we had, Daryl, we had a creek that went through the place that always kept running out at the banks and washing the water gate out, and the cattle would get out. We finally had one of these storms, and 2 years prior to this start of the church, and Daryl said, I'm tired of this, I'm going to move. And God just miraculously found us a place out on Highway U, further south from town. Had a huge Butler building. It used to be a welding shop, so it had a big, long welding shop there that had a little apartment on one end. Because it was a business, it also had a huge parking area with lots of gravel parking area. Had a 1 acre backyard and fenced in with a little playhouse and all kinds of places to play. And so when we finally just said, okay, do you want to come out to our house and just have it in the barn? And everybody came out. We moved all the tractors across the parking lot into the welding shop and turned the little apartment in the welding shop into the men's bathroom. My mom's trailer was parked, she had just gone to a nursing home, so it was parked right by the Butler building that we called the church. The Butler building had one room that was finished in it because it was kind of a little art studio for the former owners, and we turned that into the nursery. And so the babies could be cool in the summer. They could be warm in the winter because we could keep a heater in there. And we swept out the dirt and hung up some sheets to cover the walls and set up church. We had 56 people there that very first Sunday. Most of those people actually became members. Some of them never did. They were just peripheral, visited a lot, stayed. But the core members were Pauline and Ernie Gilkin, Doc and Carrol Payne, my husband and I. We had Cale and Lisa Yance. They were our worship leaders. Pastor Dusty Klein and his wife. We had, now you're asking an old brain to remember lots of details. Jeff and Debbie Ulmer. One of our funnest people to have was Lori McCullough and her 3 children. Lori ultimately became our administrative team leader. She was always a wonderful teacher, leader. She did a great job. Her little boy, to know me, you have to know that I don't like to play with little people. I do adults well. Children, I'm not so good with. And I think that even the first Sunday we were there, we had church and then we had a basket dinner. And he came into the barn and he said, he just had this terrible sad look on his face. And I said, Kern, what's the matter? And he said, well, nobody will play with me. This is another miracle. I said, well, I'll play with you. We went to the playhouse and we had a big time. And you know, for me to play with kids was just unheard of. But that was how we started. We stayed there for till August. It was cold when we went in. We used those big old gas-generated heaters, and we had fans hanging from the ceiling, but when it's 100 degrees, you just don't care how hot, how much the air is stirring, it's going to be hot. But we went from the barn to, we met in the Harmony Baptist Association building for 15 months. We almost died there. It got really, really hard. We were very limited in space. God was calling us west, and we'd gone as far east as we could go because that was the opposite end of the city. If we had visitors, they usually didn't come back. We were cramped. We had a difficult time even having Sunday school classes. We felt like we were doing everything we could, but it just was flat. You know, we just couldn't make anything happen. Still felt a real call that God wanted us to do something, but we didn't know what. Then at about the end of that 15 months that we were at, in fact, we're still there, Dusty Klein, our pastor, said, God is telling me that I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to plant a new church. He said, I know how to do church, but I don't know how to plant a church. And it is a totally different mindset in everything that you do. And so he resigned. And here's another miracle. We got a call from Jerry Field. He is the church plant expert in the state of Missouri, in the Baptist Convention. And he called and said, God is telling me that he wants me to be your interim pastor. We hadn't even approached him with that, but he knew that we needed one, and so he volunteered to be our interim pastor. The convention would allow him 6 months to do that. He came and started preaching while we were still in the associational office, and all of a sudden, doors just started opening. We had tried to find a place, and miraculously, we discovered that, found the owner of the old Aldi building here in on Thompson Boulevard, and so we called him, and he let us rent the Aldi's building. And we spent the next 5 weeks cleaning it, making a stage, hanging curtains to make kind of a backdrop, and building a room in the back to make it more of a nursery area. And we had our launch service in, I believe, October of 2002, 2003. I had 50 some odd people there. Mayor Wasson of our Sedalia was there. And you know, we never looked back. It was from that point forward, we just began to see numbers and people and decisions and people joining the church, and the growth was phenomenal. We began to, we'd seen the miracles, but we were really seeing the miracles. Another miracle. 2 years before we started Cornerstone, same time Doc Payne is trying to sell the farm and all that kind of stuff, there was a gentleman in Oklahoma City that went to, I'll think of it in a minute, went to a Baptist church in Oklahoma City, Kentucky Avenue Baptist Church. He was an older gentleman. There was a lady in the church that was kind of his caregiver, and he had to go to the hospital. So he asked her if she would keep a box of his possessions, things that he wanted to keep, didn't want to lose. He said, if I die, just give the whole box to the church and let them deal with it. And he did pass away, and she gave the box to the church. And in it, they found a sizable amount of money. So they put it in the bank, and they said, we will just keep this in the bank. Someday we'll know what God wants us to do with it. Fast forward to 2 years, Cornerstone is now looking for property, and we located the property out on Highway U. U is my address. We got a price for it, and our pastor, Dusty Klein, who we didn't know 2 years prior when the gentleman was leaving this money with the Kentucky Avenue Baptist Church. Dusty called his mother. Oh, by the way, she is the church secretary at Kentucky Avenue Baptist Church in Oklahoma City. And he said, "Mom, we found the land and we know we're just sure this is where God wants us." And she said, "How much is it, an acre?" And he said, $6,500 an acre. Would you like to guess how much money was sitting in a bank account? In $6,500. 2 years before we started Cornerstone, God already had our first acre bought. I'd never have told that story without crying. Just can't do it. That's the kind of stuff we saw over and over and over again. We probably another big financial one was, there's so many of those financial ones, but one that was huge was we were ready to pay off the loan. We had taken out a balloon note, and it was time for the last payment, and we were $10,000 short of being able to make it. And we were scrambling for where we're going to come up with this money. And out of the blue, we got a check the day the payment was due from Arizona, from friends that we'd known years before but had no idea of what was going on, what the need was or anything else. But they knew that we'd started Cornerstone, and they sent us a $10,000 check to make that balloon payment note. So that the people that started it, we've always been told God started it with good soil. They had a heart. We didn't leave Calvary mad. We weren't trying to prove anything. We were trying to just follow God's call. We felt definitely that God was calling us to do something. And look, He really was.
And you founding members, you weren't pastors?
No, just people. We were just people. Pauline Gilkin and I, she was retired. I was close to being retired. When we finally got to the Aldi building, God just told me it was time to quit. And so I quit where I was working and started our church office. At the time, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have an address, nobody knew we were even there. I mean, there wasn't that much publicity about us. And so my former boss gave me an old desk and a counter and a chair and a copy machine and a file cabinet and all the stuff that you start an office with. And we set it up in the front of the Aldi's as you come in the door. In that old Aldi building, we set it right there and put some furniture around, a little throw rug, and that was our office. And I just went to work just building a kingdom. And Pauline was right with me. We were quite the pair. She was a remarkable lady. She loved Cornerstone. She and Ernie were such caring, giving, supportive of the church. And she was the greeter. The first time you came in the door in any building that we were in, she met you with a little sign-in book, and you got to write your name down. So we always know how many people basically were there and who they were. I even have a list of the people who visited that first service that we had in the barn. She was our treasurer and our church clerk, so she was a detail person. And the details she didn't keep, I did. We just did a lot of stuff like that. We felt one of the things that First Baptist Church Warrensburg did was when they had first-time visitors, they always took them a welcome basket. And so we decided that's what we were going to do personally. And so she and I made a pact. We made the small homemade bread, and we made 3 different kinds of cookies and put 6 of those each in just one of those little sacks, that gift bag sacks. And we visited every first-time visitor we had that lived within a 20-mile radius of Sedalia. And when we were in the Aldi's building one Sunday, by then was Pastor Rusty, was our pastor, and he said, just for curiosity, how many of you people have received a welcome basket from Pauline or Carol? And I would say probably 80% of the people in the building held up their hands. One young man said, that's the only reason I came, was to get a welcome basket. So Pauline and Ernie were a huge, Lori McCullough was a huge factor in just the leadership, the stability. We struggled so many times. There were the ups and the downs, but always more ups than downs and more blessings than not. And it's been an exciting journey. And then we took out a loan and started building here. And it was interesting because our lease ran up on the Aldi's building before we had this building finished. And so we had to move out the first of the year. It was the year, and I can't ever remember the dates, but it was the year that we had one of the worst ice storms in the history of Sedalia. And we moved everything in this building, or that building, on the 1st of January, just before the ice storm hit. The building was finished enough that it was framed up, and some of the sheetrock was already mudded and painted, but most of it wasn't even mudded or painted. It was just sheetrock. And the office was a shell. It didn't even have glass on the window that was out in the hall. We did have the outdoor windows closed. We didn't have running water, and so we had to put porta potties out on the concrete in front of the building, off to the side. Put heaters in there to keep us warm. And then just within a week after we got moved into that, the ice storm hit. Hardest thing you ever did in your life was trying to get out of that building and to that porta potty in that ice. You know, it was pretty. Before we had the concrete entry, the entryway down at the highway was just gravel. Big rain, and it would just gully it out till you couldn't even get up it. And when it was ice, you definitely couldn't get, it was really, really bad. But it was tough. We had, at that time, we couldn't have church in the building, and so we took our people to Smith Cotton High School, and that's where we met for 9 weeks. And while we tried to finish, by March, we were in the building. And again, we still didn't have a lot of the sheetrocking done, a lot of the painting done. The floors were just concrete floors. We didn't have any of the finished work. It took us until lots of years later to even get the finished upstairs part done. We had people, we had decisions. There was one year we had 500 plus first-time visitors. A lot of them didn't come back, but the curiosity was just the people that showed up, and that was. We got to the place Pauline and I could bake the stuff, but we just couldn't deliver all the stuff. We started getting help from other people to help us deliver those welcome baskets, but it was amazing. It was amazing. We saw people grow. We saw people just the coming, just the fact that they kept coming. That you have to remember, a traditional church doesn't. I mean, we at Calvary, we would see a visitor here now and then, but not 50 a day. That was the most amazing thing to us. We just never got used to how people were just drawn to the place.
What do you think that came from?
Well, I give God the glory for that. I think a lot of people came because somebody told them you need to try it. A lot of people were just as excited about Cornerstone as I am. They really felt that difference. And God's Spirit says He'll draw all men to Him. I think Him working, just His presence, I've had more people tell me, I can sense God here better than I've ever been able to before. There was just a power, an anointing, if you want for a word, that God gave. You know, for years, as long as I was church secretary, I was the mama. You know, we are the only two, my husband and I are the only two charter members in the church still that are still alive and in the church. We've lost a lot of our people. A lot of our people moved away. You know, the young families, they had jobs that moved them. Some of them just went to other places. But I have, in the last 5 years, 6, 8 years, began to really slow down. I always had a mother hen approach to the church and the ministry. I felt responsible, and God finally showed me He could do this without me. And we have a whole new generation of people that need to be in charge. I've never felt like I was possessive, and I never felt like I wanted to control what happened. I always tried my best to hands off, you know, type of approach. And as I've gotten older, you know, I just can't physically do what I used to do. I still try to, I'm a prayer warrior. We still tithe and give and attend, but I'm not as actively involved as I was. Oh, I lived here. I worked all day and served all night when we were young, and but I feel like we both felt like we just needed to back away and just be people. We have had a lot of personalities. This many people, you're going to find a lot of personalities. I've always rejoiced in how God put us together and who He put together. We've had a lot of people leave, but we've had a lot of people come. The turnover in this church is remarkable to me. When we were in the older building, our first building, I could probably tell you the name of 80% of the people that came in the door on Sunday morning. Some of them only came occasionally, but I just had a way of figuring out who they were. And also the fact that Pauline had them write their name down every Sunday helped, because I posted that on the computer so we know who was there. And I've always known, and I rejoice in knowing with time, as I watched how God has built His church. When he was ready for change, He would make a change, however it had to be done. And that has been fun to watch. It doesn't feel good sometimes. Growth, especially when young children grow really fast, you know, their joints ache. And I think that was what we as a church went through a lot. We just grew so fast. We were awkward, if you want for a word. And probably one of the most exciting times was when we had a benefactor step up and help us finish the first building. We had always, this is what I think is another miracle. We built our first building for it to be a school. If you were to look at the doors in the Sunday school rooms, they are classic schoolroom doors with the little windows so that you could see in. That was always our dream, was to have a school. And it's taken us 20 years to get there, but we're there. I mean, that's exciting. But we had someone that stepped up and helped us finish, just financed it to completely finish and refurbish our first building, and did the concrete parking lot. Now we don't have to fight that driveway every time we come in the church. That was probably the most amazing time No, that wasn't the most amazing. That was another one of those amazings. It's just, I think what God has taught us through this church is that He really does know how to take care of His people. He really can provide. His will is perfect, and He has a perfect plan. And I think Cornerstone in every way is just proof of that. We're just a miracle that He just decided to create. Stay the course.